We don't have one here.
That's fine. Okay.
All right, folks, for the sake of time, I'm going to start the introduction for the next speaker so that they have enough time to do their presentation. Welcome to the session, the online dialogue opportunity. If you're joining us online, please place your questions in the Q&A panel rather than the chat panel, as the chat will not be moderated. For attendees here in the room, please hold your questions until the end of the session. We'll try to get to as many as possible. If we don't get to them, some presenters will join the chat and try to answer questions individually. In this session, Dr. Terry Shoemaker, Associate Teaching Professor in the School of Historical, Philosophical, and Religious Studies, will examine the pedagogical benefits of offering some online recorded lectures between scholars and instructors. Sorry, I skipped a line. Recorded lectures in a dialogue format rather than monologue, and how recording conversations between scholars or instructors increases accessibility to knowledge for students. Welcome, Dr. Shoemaker.
Thank you so much for that introduction. Thanks to everyone who had a role in planning today, and for all the other presenters. Let me say that I am an instructor in the humanities, and I'll talk about that just a little bit. And so in some ways, I feel a little bit like an imposter speaking with some of you who are much more well-versed in the scholarship of learning. But I simply want to share with you today something that I've started using over the last few years, and I want to talk about the successes and the benefits that I've seen for an instructor and also for students and their feedback. So to begin with, I simply want to introduce myself, just some of the points to add on to the introduction I was given. I am myself a first-generation college student, so one of the things I really try to focus on is trying to think about my experience as a first-generation college student and what that was like, and the intimidation of certain phrases and technical languages that were very intimidating for me. I'm also a veteran. It may come into play. I'm an identical twin. I think it's an odd thing when you have a duplicated DNA version of yourself walking around, and how that shapes who you are as a person. And I think if I actually reflect on my life, this drastically shaped who I am today. I also just want to admit that I have several privileges that as a white male, as an able-bodied person, that I have lots and lots of privileges. And then just to give you a sense of what I teach, I have a PhD in religious studies, and so I am in Shippers, or the School of Historical, Philosophical, and Religious Studies. In the field of religious studies, I always feel like religious studies needs like a PR campaign because no one knows exactly what we do. They think it's like some sort of glorified like Sunday school or something. But it's actually like a humanities, social science approach to studying religious phenomenon across the globe, historically, contemporarily. Lots and lots, you can imagine, of topics. It's interdisciplinary, so there's sociologists, there's anthropologists, there's historians, there's textual-based people. There's so much going on in religious studies. And just to give you an idea, we offer everything from, say, religion and environmentalism. We do kind of the history of religions. We do religion and pop culture. I teach religion and sports. And so it's this vast, vast field of scholarship. And on top of it, most of our students, the bulk of our students are not majors in religious studies. And so they're taking 100, 200 level courses that are supposed to provide this expansive kind of understanding of religion across the globe in the United States. I mean, it's really kind of an overwhelming kind of task that we do. So in building those courses, I teach a lot of online. And if you do a search for images of online education, this kind of image pops up all the time. And I always think it's fascinating that it's almost always the instructor pops out of the computer, right? As like this symbolic thing that we imagine that we're doing when we're instructing, is that we're bigger than the computer itself, and this is an access point, and it's doing all these amazing kind of things. It's almost always a dude in the images that I just want to like recognize that pop up as well. And it's always this idea that there's a single person disseminating knowledge, right? I mean, this is kind of just the standard way that we kind of do things, because online kind of transitioned, I think, based off of the classroom model of the one instructor with the numerous students, right? And so we can kind of imagine it looking like this a little bit. Each student has their laptop access to the one instructor. And so this is kind of, this monologue or monological kind of format that we've inherited and that we then transitioned over to our online platforms. And so it allows this kind of unidirectional communication with multiple students. And in some ways, I'm not like trashing this, because it's phenomenal for access for students across the globe, especially our asynchronous courses that can reach students across the globe at different time zones. It's quite amazing. And then there's actually new tools that allow some interactions between these recorded lectures that we do, which I think is quite an advancement on the lectures. Although I will say, if you read in the literature, there's actually quite a bit of discussion in academic literature that kind of gets to this, that the lectures are somehow now obsolete. That the more we're learning about how people learn, the lecture thing that we've all inherited and we do, because what else are we going to do, right, is the idea, is obsolete. That learners, students now, because of technology, are learning in different kinds of formats. And so in reading this, it really got me thinking about the lecture format that we use. And I just want to show you one thing really quickly. This is not to brag on me. This is to brag on some of our technology people. We're getting really good at the lectures. Let me see if this will actually load in. We'll see. Now, let me pause it. I should have said there's an audio component to this. Yeah, thank you. Yeah. Yeah. It's okay if we can't. I can move on. It's not absolutely essential.
It's not actually allowing us to select those radio buttons. He said he's going to go ahead and...
Yeah, we'll just move on for the sake of time. Thank you, though. But I simply want to, and since you won't be able to like hear it, but just some of the ways that we're making these more interactive, and then I pop up and everything else. But it's amazing how good we're getting at making the lectures. And so in some ways, I wanted to say, I'm not necessarily... I don't think that the lectures are absolutely obsolete. So I wanted to be clear with that. And I think we do a lot of things to kind of mitigate this idea. We have discussion boards, we have group work, we have third-party apps. So I'm not completely opposed to the monologue lecture. But what I want to suggest is that this model, even right now, right, this is me talking to you, an audience, this is a model that's kind of like infiltrated everything that we kind of do in higher ed. And if we think about this, whenever, and this was me thinking about how I prep for these monologues, these TED Talks that I kind of do, right? And that we record. When I do this, I tend to use very field specific language because part of me needs to like look smarter, right? Like I need to look like and act like a scholar. So I use these very field specific language terms. And then sometimes I'll rewatch it and I'm like, man, I didn't even explain that. Like no one's going to understand what that means, right? And the pressure's on me to perform and to perform these in such a way that it transmits the knowledge. And then the pressure is then put on the students to absorb the knowledge that I am trying to do. And then the built-in hierarchies of I'm the instructor, they're the learner. It's already kind of there. And then because it is recorded, it's disembodied, and now people are trying to understand who I am. These odd kind of performative movements I'm trying to make, and some movements I'm trying not to make, right? So these monologues have some different things that I think maybe don't lend itself perfectly to what we're trying to do. So in this question of, is the monologue the best way to approach online knowledge dissemination, especially in asynchronous classes where we're recording it, got me thinking about where do we learn elsewhere and how do we learn? And so for me, I was thinking about how I learn, and this is a model you'll see pops up online quite a bit about the interactive behaviors I have with my students, especially in an online environment. What does that interaction look like? Does this somehow facilitate learning in the way that I think does it allow me to pop off of the screen like the GIFs right at the beginning, right? Is this really doing what I think it's doing? And so it got me thinking, how do we learn inside and outside of the classroom, and how I couldn't bring some of that in. And so in the research, one of the things that is quite obvious is there's a huge emphasis on dialogue with our students. And this can be the idea that we need to have dialogical classrooms, that we need to embed more dialogue discussion boards online, that we need to have that students, there's actually research showing that students who actually will sit at a computer together and watch a lecture together absorb it better because they pause and they talk about it, right? So that's a dialogical means. Dialogical presentation, there's a lot written currently in the scholarship about having a recording between the instructor and a learner that's somewhat performative and script, right? But like that tends to work well. There's actually some really interesting stuff going on with the instructor talking with artificial intelligence, which I think is really, really interesting. But because I have phenomenal colleagues, I thought, what if I actually just interviewed my phenomenal colleagues as part of the learning process? And so this is what I call Big Beard Terry. This is me years ago. But speaking with Victoria Jackson, who's a sports historian, and the cool thing about this lecture was, because I only had like 3 questions total that I sent to her, and then it was completely improvised. And the cool thing about this lecture was Victoria really started talking about how she got drawn into sports studies and what her experience was like in college and how she became a scholar. This particular lecture that we did over Zoom, because you can do it over Zoom, I think this works better because people can actually see your movements and interactions. This was actually with an undergraduate student who did some research with me, and so this particular one is amazing for students because they think, oh, I could do research like that. Not quite scripted. We have a PowerPoint that we're going off of. I get to talk with them about the research process, how we went about it, what we did. And I've conducted these interview lectures with professors of religion and environmentalism, colonialism and Christianity, and several other types of scholars interacting and researchers interacting with each other. So I wanted to say the benefits of these for students. It is absolutely amazing. I know exactly when a module has run because I will get, particularly off of these are the two I wanted to show you. When this lecture runs in my sports and religions class, I will get 5 to 10 emails from students, typically female students, who will say, "That was absolutely brilliant. Thank you so much for bringing in a different voice." When I do, and I know when this one runs, because I'll have 5 to 10, sometimes even more students email me and say, "I had no idea as a student we could do research like that." Because we actually went out and we interviewed skateboarders and talked about the importance of play in this world, in this contemporary life. And then students, like they immediately will email me and say, "Okay, I'm not a sports fan. I don't know why I'm taking this class. Now it makes sense to me. Now I get it." So I think these really resonate with students. And what I discovered is when we're just talking with each other, we just naturally decrease our scholarly language, right? We just go to more of a colloquial kind of way of speaking. It increases the voices in our classrooms, right? It humanizes instructors. It obviously increases the interesting topics that we can cover, especially in a gen ed course, brings in other voices. Students respond exceptionally well. And then it serves for our students, it serves as an ambassador for other instructors and courses. So after every one of these lectures, there's a note, and sometimes at the end of the video, if I remember, it is say, "If you're interested in taking one of Victoria Jackson's courses, here's the things she typically teaches." I don't know how to track it, right? If it's successful as far as feeding into other courses or not. But I will say that Victoria uses this same interview in one of her courses, and I know I've had students come to my class because they saw the video of me interviewing her. So I think that works. For the instructor, the benefits for the actual instructors, because these are recorded, this isn't like an in-person every semester you have to have someone come to your classroom and then you got to plan around schedules. Plan once, record it, and then you're done and you can embed it in your classes, right? Increases potential topics, learn more about your colleagues' works. I was totally surprised how little I knew about my colleagues before I started doing this. Absolutely amazing collegial kind of build here, an ambassador for other instructors and courses as well. So for those of us who are in fields who are trying to increase enrollments, it definitely helps. A few of the references there, and I'm done a little bit early. So I will take any questions and I will try my best to respond to those.
Thank you. Does anyone have a question? Oh, there you go. Sorry, out of my field of sight.
So you take your learning objective and then you find like research or people who have already done things that fit that objective, or do you like work with a student or a colleague to curate an experience that would then fit that objective, or both?
Yeah, so a lot of times, thank you very much for your question. Oftentimes, it's driven by the strategies and objectives that I've built into the course. For instance, I really most of these. Let me say this. I should have said this. Most of these will follow me giving a lecture on the topic, right? So there's 2 lectures in the module. The first one, so the one with the skateboarding, I actually give kind of this. It's a deeper philosophical understanding of the importance of play in the human experience. And then afterwards, the next video right afterwards in the flow of the course is the video about skateboarding. So then students can actually see a case study on it. Sometimes it's more of a convenience kind of thing. I know someone in my school is doing something really, really cool, and I'm like, this is a 100 level class. They need to know that this is something they can study. And so I invite them in. Yeah.
Perfect. We have 2 online questions. The first one is, did you produce your lecture video on your own, or did you work with the video producers at ASU?
Both and. Yeah, so the one with Victoria and we worked with the recording studio and staff here at ASU because it was a a bigger room, and we just kind of needed it at the time. I've been told in our recording studio, I've been told this, that we can fit 2 people in there and actually record something like this. And I haven't done it yet with the remodel of our studio that we have currently in Shippers. But then I've also, just with Zoom, and well, I will say I do have one recorded in our old recording studio, and we just put 2 chairs in there and recorded it.
Perfect. I know that they've got recording studios also in the Computing Commons,
Mhm.
and then Ed Plus also has recording studios, so lots of resources. The second question is, part of what makes good recorded content is personality. Yours definitely came through in the presentation. What advice do you have for folks to get comfortable being themselves in recorded content?
That's a really, really good question, and thanks for the compliment that my personality came through. It's because I'm an identical twin. Actually did mean to loop back to the idea that maybe this is just bias of being an identical twin, and that I've always been communicating with another human being, and it's like part of who I am. But I would say that practice makes perfect, or close to perfect. That the more you do this, trial and error will show you what works and what kind of doesn't work. I will say that I've been fortunate enough that most of these are just one take, and then we're done. But there was the one instance where we started talking and both of us said, wait, this isn't working. And we just shut it down, deleted it, so we would never ever have to see it again, and then just started the whole process again. And the second take was much, much better. Yeah. Any other questions in here?
Okay, thank you, Dr. Shoemaker.
Thanks
Our
to
next
everybody.
session, yes, thank you, applause. Our next session, Cultivating a Culture of Access at Georgetown, will begin in about 10 minutes. Please join us here in the Alumni Room at the Memorial Union on ASU's Tempe campus, or virtually on Zoom using the same link for this session. If you are going to a different session online, you can find those links on the schedule on the conference page. If you get a chance, please go to the schedule page on the conference website and use the QR code to find the conference survey. We appreciate any feedback on how to make this event better for next year. And we are also giving the first 500 responses to that survey a free copy of our keynote speakers book from this morning. Thank you again, and we'll be back in about 10 minutes.